Hello, loud teachers, and welcome to Learning is Not Quiet presents 5th grade Common Core Every Reading Standard Posters and Passage Practice. Blah! Not only is that a mouthful to say, it might not sound initially as engaging as some of my other products. However, I think it is crucially important to students' reading development, and so I want to go through today how I use this product, why I think it's valuable, and different ways to use it with your students. So let's get started. If you're watching this video, you have likely already purchased or are thinking about purchasing this 5th grade Common Core Every Reading Standard Posters and Passages Practice on my Teachers Pay Teachers store. You might also be watching this video for inspiration. Any products I talk about in this video will have links to them in the description to my Teachers Pay Teachers store. So, the first thing you'll notice in this product is a bunch of ways to use both the posters and the practice passages. So, with the posters, some of the ways that I use them is, number one, posted around the classroom, especially if your school was like mine where they're really big on having a standard posted. Especially cool is if you're at a school that has a poster maker. I've been at 2 schools that had a poster maker and it was wonderful. Oh my goodness. You can print this out and then you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can put it as an anchor chart somewhere in your classroom. Specifically in my last classroom, I used the blinds and would use paper clips to attach the anchor charts to the blinds. So be creative. That's one way to use this. Anchor chart, posted standards. Another way to use this is if you especially have a class where everybody needs that kind of differentiation, you can pass out these sheets as you go through different standards throughout the year. This connects really well with my reading strategies bundles. In addition, another way that you can use this is for students who might have an IEP. This is a great way to give sentence stems. This is a great way to give that step-by-step process that they can get in the habit of referring back to. I really like that because it makes those students independent while also giving them support for what they might need to answer certain questions. And especially when we get into the passage practice, students can literally look back at the step-by-step processes and go through those step-by-step processes, and the standard is listed in the passage so they know exactly where to look for that kind of help. Obviously, that's not something you would have on a standardized test, but it gets them in the habit of knowing what to do in those questions and builds up that scaffolding, builds up that confidence. So, that's how I would use the posters. For the passage practice, you can use this as a bell ringer. You might assign a different set of standards each day and have students use the posters and or booklet to help answer the questions. You can use this as a review for standardized tests. You can use it as homework, although that's not recommended, to familiarize students with the language of testing. I'm a linguist, so I did a lot of work going through different standardized tests and identifying the language that they use with those kinds of questions. You can use these passages as a gateway to larger conversations. This addresses every standard, but also in very important issues like bullying, peer pressure, social media, etc. So kind of use that as a jumpstart, especially if you're using this as bell work. It's a great way to connect it to what you're going to talk about in like a in a class discussion. So you can also use this as a weekly assessment to see how students are doing with various skills. In my classroom, I really use this as a bell ringer. Next, you will see a series of posters. Obviously, I'm not going to show you what all the posters look like in this video, but this is kind of the general setup. So it tells you the RL and RI standard if they kind of go together. So the RL 5.1 is quote accurately from a fiction text, and RI 5.1 is to quote accurately from a nonfiction text. So rather than have 2 posters, I've kind of combined those 2 concepts into one. So the first one says a walkthrough, and it gives a step-by-step process for how students might address this standard. And when teaching this, you can actually literally go through it, especially if you're using this as an anchor chart. Then the next one shows you what this looks like. So it has a short sample passage and step-by-step how students are using that walkthrough to answer that specific question. Then on the far right side, there's extra things. So it might give a sentence stem. It might give grammar things you need to know. So for this one, students often get confused about how to use quotation marks in their sentences, especially with the commas and the capitalization. So that's kind of the support you get there. Just kind of another example, this is RL 5.9. I can contrast stories or articles from the same genre or the same topic. Again, you get the walkthrough, you get the look like. One thing I want to point out on the looks like is I show you how to use graphic organizers with this. And then on the far right for this one, it gives all of the genres that would be associated with this and what that word genre means. All right. Also included in this product are a number of other posters. So for this one, it gives the perfect paragraph poster. I have different posters about plot or about words that you might use to describe author's voice, and those are connected with the different standards that are given. So it's really in a logical order through the standards and should not be too hard to figure out. Always feel free to ask me questions if you're struggling with where and how and why to use this in your classroom. Again, I'd really like to have anchor charts posted, especially when we're new to a topic. I don't think it takes away the rigor from the students. I think it really is empowering, and students eventually, they use them as disposable crutches, right? They are useful in the beginning and they might be totally dependent on them. I've never really had a student who stayed dependent on the anchor chart. They usually slowly build up that confidence, slowly build up that skill level to be able to do it on their own. So also in this product is a series of nonfiction passages as well as fiction passages. So for example, this one is on Legos, and it gives a short history of Legos. And then underneath you see RI 5.1, RI 5.2, and it goes through each of those standards with one question basically from each of those standards. This is also really helpful for me at the end of the year because I sometimes get so excited about my teaching, and then it rolls around to standardized testing time and I'm like, oh my God, what did I not teach? And this kind of helps fill that gap as well, and it makes sure that you've hit every standard and you've hit it all accurately, and you can really see what you haven't taught well from how students do on these if you use them as an assessment. So this one is on Legos. This next one is on TikTok. When I wrote this, TikTok wasn't such a controversial topic, so kind of proceed with caution, but it really kind of gives the pros and cons of TikTok and has students respond in the end to how they feel about TikTok. Again, a great starting point to deeper conversations. There's also these fictional passages, sometimes fantasy, sometimes realistic fiction. Again, you can have students go back to that genre page with each of these and identify the genre. That's a specific question in here, but a great place to start and make sure students are referring back to that and being as specific as possible. Something with the fiction passages that I've really focused on is these plot charts. Now, usually people do not use these plot charts until students get to high school, which makes no sense to me because this is a wonderful graphic organizer for students to understand how stories are laid out. And I find that when students have gone through this looking at other passages, their creative writing becomes even better because it's not just like random ideas thrown on a page, which has a time and place, but their creative writing becomes a little bit more organized. So this has you identify the exposition, the climax, the resolution, and a way to differentiate this is to have students focus, if you are working with students with disabilities or language learners, is to define what those expositions are and have them refer back, or only focus on exposition, climax, and resolution. All right, so I hope that was helpful in understanding what's included in this product, how you use it in your classroom, why it's helpful. It really, 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 in summary, helps keep you focused on what is important in your reading classroom, helps you identify where you've been weak, and make sure that you cover every single standard, because we know there's only so many hours in the school day, there's only so many days in the school year, there's snow days and pandemics and all this kind of stuff, and we need to be adaptable, and I feel like this product really feels that need of how do I teach everything I need to, how do I make it not boring, and how do I really focus my lessons on one specific strategy or idea. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a wonderful day, and thank you for being awesome. Adios.